She never planned to fall in love with him. And she never planned to die for him either. But that's the thing about love inside a werewolf pack. It doesn't ask for your permission. It doesn't care about your rank, your bloodline, or the rules carved into the walls of ancient stone halls. It finds you in the dark, wraps around your bones, and refuses to let go, even when it destroys you. Her name was Alara, and this is her story. Alara was 22 years old when her life ended. Not the way you're thinking, not yet, but the life she had known, the quiet, invisible life of a maid inside Ironvale Pack, the most feared pack in the Northern Territories. That life ended the night she heard something she was never supposed to hear. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. To understand how she died, you have to understand how she lived. And to understand how she lived, you have to understand who she loved. She had been brought to Ironvale Pack when she was 16. Her own pack had been dissolved not by war, not by disease, but by poverty and weakness. A small cluster of wolves with no alpha strong enough to hold territory. When the elders finally surrendered their land to Ironvale, the able-bodied men were absorbed into the guard ranks and the women were assigned to domestic service. Alara was assigned to the Great Hall. She scrubbed floors. She polished silver. She washed linens that smelled like pine and iron and something wild she couldn't name. She kept her head down, spoke only when spoken to, and learned very quickly that inside Ironvale, invisibility was the safest form of armor a maid could wear. The pack was enormous. Hundreds of wolves spread across a territory so vast that some members went months without seeing each other. The training grounds alone were the size of a small village. The main estate, a structure half stone, half old-growth timber, rose from the hillside like something that had grown there naturally, as if the earth itself had pushed it up from its roots. And at the center of all of it was him, Alpha Kale Draven. Alara had seen him for the first time on her third day at Ironvale. She had been carrying a basket of linens through the eastern corridor when the doors at the far end burst open and he walked through, flanked by two of his generals, voice low and controlled as he gave orders without breaking stride. He was tall, taller than she expected. Dark hair, sharp jaw, the kind of face that looked like it had been carved by someone who was angry when they made it. Not beautiful in a soft way, powerful in a way that made the air around him feel different. Heavier, charged. He hadn't looked at her. She hadn't expected him to. She was a maid. He was the alpha. Those were two different worlds sharing the same building, and the distance between them might as well have been a canyon. She picked up her basket and kept walking. And that, she told herself, was that. Except it wasn't. 3 weeks later, she was cleaning the alpha's private study late at night. A task that fell to the senior maids during the day, but the head housekeeper had assigned it to Alara as punishment for breaking a glass that morning. The study was supposed to be empty. The alpha was supposed to be at the border for a 3-day territorial meeting. He wasn't. She didn't hear him come in. One moment she was on her knees wiping the base of a bookshelf, and the next she could feel something behind her. A presence so heavy it made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. She turned, and there he was, standing in the doorway still wearing his traveling coat, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. She scrambled to her feet. "I'm sorry, Alpha. I was told," the housekeeper said. "The room needed." "It's fine." His voice was quiet, not soft, just controlled. She grabbed her supplies and tried to move past him. He stepped aside. But as she crossed the threshold, he spoke again. "You broke something today." She stopped, turned halfway. "A glass." "Yes, Alpha. I apologize. It won't happen. I'm not angry about the glass." He wasn't looking at her anymore. He was already moving toward his desk, pulling off his coat. "I'm telling you that whoever punished you for an accident will answer to me tomorrow." She stood there for 2 full seconds, unable to process what had just happened. Then she left. She didn't sleep that night. If you're new here and you love stories that pull your heart out through your chest, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now, because this story is only just beginning, and I promise you, you are not ready for where it goes. After that night, she noticed him noticing her. It was subtle, so subtle that she spent weeks convincing herself she was imagining it. A glance across the great hall, a pause in his step when he passed her in the corridor. Once, when she was serving at a formal dinner and her hand shook as she poured wine for one of the visiting alphas, she felt his gaze on her from the head of the table. Steady, grounding, and her hand stopped shaking. She told herself it meant nothing. She told herself that every time. She stopped believing it on a rainy evening in early autumn, when she was sent to deliver a message to the Alpha's private wing, and found him sitting in the small reading room off the main corridor. A fire going, a book open in his lap that he wasn't reading. He looked up when she entered. Closed the door. She did. And they talked. Not about anything significant, not at first. He asked where she was from. She told him. He asked what her rank had been in her old pack. She told him that too. He listened in a way that felt unusual, like he was actually absorbing what she said rather than simply waiting for her to stop speaking. She was there for 40 minutes. When she finally said she had to get back, he nodded and said nothing else. She stepped out into the corridor, and she stood there for a long moment with her back against the closed door, and her heart beating so loudly she was certain someone could hear it from down the hall. This was a mistake. She knew that. She knew it with every rational part of her brain. She went back the next evening anyway. What followed was 6 months of something that had no name and no rules. They met in the evenings, always in private spaces, always away from witnesses. They talked. They argued sometimes. He had strong opinions and so did she, and discovering that surprised him in a way that he didn't bother to hide. He wasn't accustomed to being challenged, and she wasn't accustomed to feeling like her words had weight. Each of them gave the other something they hadn't expected. And then one evening the talking stopped being enough. She had been telling him about her mother, who had died when Alara was 12, and something about the way she described the memory. Quietly, without self-pity, with that particular brand of dignity that people develop when grief has become a familiar companion. Made him reach across and take her hand. Just that. Just her hand in his. She looked down at their joined hands. Then up at him. He wasn't looking away. And that was where the point of no return was. Not in a kiss, not in a grand declaration. In the quiet act of a powerful man reaching across the space between them and choosing not to let go. "This is impossible," she whispered. "I know," he said. He didn't let go. For the next 8 months they existed in a world of two. Behind closed doors he was not the alpha. He was Kale. He was the man who read history books and debated their accuracy with her. Who remembered details she mentioned in passing and brought them up weeks later. Who held her like she was something valuable. Not fragile, not breakable, but genuinely, deeply valuable. But outside those doors nothing changed. She was still a maid. He was still the alpha. In public, his eyes passed over her exactly as they passed over every other staff member. Without recognition, without warmth. She served at dinners where he sat at the head of the table, and he never looked at her. She walked past him in corridors while he spoke with his generals, and he never acknowledged her. She understood why. She told herself she understood why. A maid and an alpha. The pack would not accept it. The elders would revolt. His standing, built on decades of strength and strategy and blood, would be undermined by something as irrational and rank-breaking as choosing a woman with no lineage, no status, no bloodline worth recording. She understood all of it. But understanding something and being undamaged by it are two entirely different things. There were nights when she lay alone in her small room in the maid's quarters and stared at the ceiling and told herself to stop, to end it, to find whatever was left of her common sense and use it to build a wall between herself and the thing that was happening. She never did, because he would come to her the next evening and look at her with those steady dark eyes and she would lose every argument she had made with herself, all over again. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" she asked him once. He was quiet for a long moment. "Yes. And I'm working on it." She didn't ask what that meant. She was afraid the answer would be something she wasn't ready to hear. So she let it sit between them, that half answer, that almost promise, and she convinced herself it was enough. She was very good at convincing herself of things. The rumor reached her on a Tuesday morning in late winter. She was in the laundry room with 2 other maids. Bess, who had been at Ironvale for 15 years and knew everything about everyone, and Sonia, who was young and wide-eyed and absorbed gossip like water into sand. Alara wasn't paying attention at first. She was sorting linens, thinking about something Kale had said the night before, something that had felt like the beginning of a larger conversation, something she was still turning over in her mind. "Lady Isolde of the Stonecroft pack," Bess was saying, her voice low and conspiratorial. "Daughter of Alpha Rennick. They say negotiations have been going on for months." Alara's hands slowed. "A marriage alliance?" Sonia breathed. "What else would it be?" A pack like Stonecroft doesn't send their daughter for dinner and a handshake. It's political. It's always political with these alphas. Our alpha needs Stonecroft's eastern border access. Stonecroft wants the military backing. Lady Isolde is just the ribbon they tie the agreement with. When? Sonia asked. Soon. That's what I've heard. Before the spring assembly. Alara set down the sheet she was holding. Very carefully. Like she was afraid of what would happen if she moved too quickly. Has the alpha confirmed it? She asked. Her voice came out even. She was proud of that. Bess shrugged. When do alphas confirm anything before they have to? But the servants from the East Wing have been preparing the formal guest rooms. Lady Isolde is expected to visit within the fortnight. You don't prepare those rooms for a casual visit. Alara picked the sheet back up. Right? She said. Of course. And she finished the laundry. And she went about her day. And she did not let a single person see the thing that had just collapsed inside her chest. She didn't ask him. She told herself she would. She rehearsed what she would say, how she would keep her voice neutral, how she would give him the chance to deny it or explain it or tell her that Bess was wrong, that the Eastern guest rooms were being prepared for some other reason, that there was no Lady Isolde, no Stonecroft negotiation, no ribbon being tied. But every time she came close to saying the words, something stopped her. Fear mostly, because if she asked and he confirmed it, then it was real. And if it was real, then everything, every evening, every conversation, every moment she had held onto like a lifeline, had been a beautiful, terrible lie, and she wasn't sure she could survive hearing that out loud. So she didn't ask. That was the choice that changed everything. She found out she was pregnant 4 days later. She had suspected for about a week but had refused to acknowledge the signs because acknowledging them would make them real, and she had been very committed, lately, to not making things real. But her body had its own agenda. She sat in her small room on the edge of her small bed with her hands flat on her stomach, and the reality of it settled over her slowly, like snow, quiet and suffocating and white. She was carrying the Alpha's child. The Alpha who was, according to the whole of the East Wing staff, about to take a noble Luna from Stonecroft Pack. She sat there for a very long time. She thought about what would happen if anyone found out. A maid, pregnant with the Alpha's child. No ceremony, no acknowledgement, no claim. The child would be illegitimate. She would be dismissed. Worse than dismissed. In some packs, the punishment for this kind of relationship, secret, unauthorized, rank-breaking, fell heaviest on the one with less power. That was always the woman. That was always the maid. She thought about the look on Cale's face if she told him. She tried to imagine it, tried to find, in her memory of him, some version of his expression that held the right answer. Something that said, I will choose you. Something that said, you are more important than strategy, than borders, than blood alliances with powerful packs. She couldn't find it. Not because he was cruel. Not because he didn't care. But because she had never made him say it. She had never asked. And now, with Lady Isolde's arrival 2 weeks away, and a secret growing inside her that could unravel both their lives, she was standing at the edge of something with no solid ground beneath her. She made her decision that night. She would leave. She packed one bag. It took her less than 20 minutes, which told her something sad about how little she had. A change of clothes, a few personal items, the small wooden carving her mother had left her, some coin she had saved over years of quiet, careful living. She left before dawn, when the pack was asleep and the guards were at their least attentive. She moved through the estate like smoke. She had, after all, spent 6 years learning every corridor, every creak in every floorboard, every shift pattern of every guard. She reached the edge of Ironvale territory as the sky was beginning to lighten from black to the deep blue that precedes morning. She did not look back. She told herself she didn't want to. That was the first of many lies she would tell herself in the months that followed. She walked for 3 days, not toward anything specific, just away. Away from Ironvale, away from Cale, away from the life that had been hers and the life she had imagined and the particular cruelty of loving someone whose world you could never fully enter. On the 3rd day, exhausted and in pain and sick with the particular misery of early pregnancy, she collapsed near the border of a small pack called Ashvin. She woke up in a healer's cottage with a warm blanket over her and a cup of something herbal steaming on the table beside her. You're safe, said the woman sitting across from her. Middle-aged, kind-faced, with the careful eyes of someone who had seen many kinds of trouble walk through her door. Rest. Alara closed her eyes. For the first time in weeks, she slept without dreaming. Back at Ironvale, nobody noticed she was gone for almost half a day. That was the nature of invisibility. You wore it as protection, and then one day it became the reason no one looked for you. It was Bess who finally said something at midday, when Alara failed to appear for her morning assignment 3 hours running. And it was the head housekeeper who reported it to the beta, mostly as a matter of administrative procedure. A maid had gone absent without leave, someone should probably log it. The beta mentioned it to the alpha that afternoon, in passing, as one of a dozen small pieces of administrative news. The alpha's reaction was not small. Say that again. The beta blinked. Alara, the maid from the West Hall. She seems to have. When? The last anyone saw her was last evening. Kale was already moving. The beta stared at the empty chair where his alpha had been sitting a moment ago. Then he looked at the door that was still swinging from being pushed open with considerable force. He had been beta of Ironvale for 11 years. He had seen Kale angry before. He had seen him in battle, had seen him in council chambers when challenges were issued and dominance was established in ways that left marks. He had never seen that look on his face. Not like that. He stood up and followed because that was his job, and because something told him that whatever this was, it was not small at all. Kale tore through the maid's quarters in under 2 minutes. Her room was the last one at the end of the corridor. He stood in the doorway and took in everything. The bare tabletop, the empty hook where her coat usually hung, the stillness of a space where someone has deliberately removed themselves. She was gone. Not lost. Not taken. Gone. The distinction hit him somewhere below his ribs with the force of something physical. He turned to the housekeeper, who had followed in a panic. Who spoke to her last? Who was the last person to see her? Who had any interaction with her in the last 48 hours? The investigation took 2 hours. He conducted it personally, which was not the kind of thing alphas typically did, and every person who witnessed it, every guard, every maid, every staff member pulled into a room and questioned, came out looking slightly shaken. And then someone mentioned the conversation in the laundry room. Bess was brought in. She was a practical woman who had survived 15 years at Ironvale by being smart about powerful people, and she was smart enough now to know that whatever she had said on Tuesday morning had done something, had set something in motion, and the alpha sitting across from her with his hands flat on the table and his jaw set like quarried stone was going to want to know exactly what. She told him. Every word. The silence afterward was the kind that has weight. Lady Isolde, Kale said finally, very quietly. Yes, Alpha. We had heard that. There are no negotiations with Stonecroft. His voice was controlled but barely. There is no Lady Isolde. There is no agreement. There is no marriage. He stood up slowly. Who told you this? Bess's face drained of color. It was the guard who works the East Corridor. Pren. He mentioned it too. He was already walking. The full story emerged in pieces, each piece worse than the last. Pren was a guard who had been, it turned out, receiving small payments from a family within the pack, a senior family who had their own candidate in mind for the Alpha's future Luna. They had fabricated the Stonecroft rumor deliberately, spread it through strategic channels, and waited for it to travel the natural network of servant gossip until it reached the right ears. They had not known about Alara specifically. They hadn't needed to. They had simply wanted to preempt any unauthorized attachment the Alpha might have formed before a proper political alliance could be arranged. They had not anticipated the Alpha's response. Kale stripped Pren of his rank and had him removed from the estate within the hour. The senior family who had funded it lost their seats on the council and were relocated to the outer settlements. He did it cleanly and without ceremony, which was somehow more frightening than anger would have been. Then he began searching for Alara. Trackers were sent out in every direction. He called in favors with allied packs, sent word through trading routes, had messengers dispatched to every pack within 3 territories. And he waited. He refused a dinner with a visiting dignitary. He canceled a border meeting. He sent his beta to represent him at the spring assembly for the first time in 12 years. His senior warriors exchanged looks behind his back. His beta tried, once carefully, to ask about the nature of the situation. Who this woman was, why her absence had shut down the Alpha's entire public life. Kale looked at him for a long moment. Find her, he said. That's all you need to know. The beta decided that was sufficient information. Alara, meanwhile, was learning to be invisible again. Ashvin Pak was small and quiet, nothing like Ironvale. The Alpha was an older man, fair-minded and unbothered, who asked few questions when the healer presented Alara as a traveling wolf in need of temporary sanctuary. Ashvin was accustomed to offering refuge. It had a long history as neutral territory, and the social code of the pack was built on pragmatic compassion. She was given a small room and light work in exchange for the accommodation. She helped in the kitchens. She mended things. She stayed quiet and kept to the edges of every gathering and declined, gently, every invitation to join pack events. She was good at disappearing. She had been practicing her whole life. Her pregnancy progressed. She was careful to eat well, rest properly, accept the healer's guidance without revealing more than she needed to about the father's identity. When the healer, a perceptive woman named Marta, asked once about the child's father, Alara simply said he was no longer part of her life. Marta looked at her for a long moment, then nodded and didn't ask again. Alara was grateful for that. At night, she lay in her small room with one hand on her growing belly and tried not to think about Ironvale. Tried not to think about the east corridor at night, the reading room with the fire, the particular sound of Kale's voice when they were alone and he allowed himself to be something other than an alpha. She tried not to think about the way he had said I'm working on it like a promise, like the beginning of something. She tried. She was not always successful. It was 4 months into her time at Ashvin that she first met him. She was carrying a crate of provisions from the storehouse to the kitchens when she came around a corner and walked directly into someone. The crate lurched. She grabbed it. He caught the other side fast, smooth, no drama. She looked up. He was tall, lighter in coloring than Kale, with an open face and steady gray eyes. He was dressed plainly enough that she didn't immediately clock his rank. He smiled at her. Not a practiced smile, not a political one, just a straightforward expression of mild amusement at the near collision. Sorry, he said. I should have looked where I was going. No, I should have. She stopped, straightened. Thank you. I'll take it. I'm fine, I'm going in the same direction. He was already holding his side of the crate. It's not a statement about your capability. It's just a heavy crate. She blinked at him. Then, because there was nothing wrong with the logic, she let him help. They walked to the kitchens. He set the crate down where she directed. He looked around the kitchen with the casual ease of someone who was comfortable in most spaces. You've been here a few months, he said. Not a question. Yes. How are you finding it? Quiet, she said. I like quiet. He smiled again. Good place for it. He glanced at her belly. She was clearly showing now, 6 months along, impossible to miss. His expression didn't change in the way she braced for. No surprise, no calculation, no flicker of the specific male discomfort that pregnancy in an unmarried woman usually produced in pack settings. He just looked back at her face. I'm Davin, he said. Alara. He nodded as though filing it away. Welcome to Ashvin, Alara. Properly, I mean, not the administrative version. He left before she could ask what he meant by that. She found out the next morning, when Marta mentioned casually over breakfast that the man from the storehouse was Alpha Davin, Ashvin's Alpha, home from a month-long visit to neighboring territories. She had walked into the Alpha of this pack like furniture and made him help her carry a crate. She sat with that for a moment, and then, in spite of everything, she laughed. It was the first time she had laughed in 4 months, and it surprised her so much she had to stop and just hold it for a second, this small, fragile thing before it disappeared. Davin did not pursue her. That was the first thing she noticed. He was simply there, present in the daily life of the pack in the way that good alphas are, visible, accessible, moving through the community rather than above it. He appeared at communal meals, helped with decisions in a collaborative way that she found quietly remarkable after years inside Ironvale's strict hierarchy. He remembered names. He asked after people's families. He was kind, consistently, unremarkably kind. She didn't know what to do with that. Every few days their paths would cross naturally, in the common areas, at meals, near the training grounds where she sometimes walked in the evenings because the movement helped with the pregnancy discomfort. He would stop and talk to her, and the conversations were easy in a way that felt unfamiliar and slightly suspicious. She kept waiting for the angle, for the moment when his patience would reveal itself as strategy. It didn't come. You're watching me, he said one evening, when they were both sitting on the low stone wall near the training grounds, watching the last of the evening light leave the sky. I'm observing, she corrected. Looking for what? She considered lying. The catch. He was quiet for a moment. What makes you think there is one? There's always one. He turned to look at her. The light was almost gone. His face was half shadow. What happened to you? That's direct. I can stop. She looked back at the darkening training ground. I trusted someone, she said finally, and I assumed things that I shouldn't have assumed, and I left before I found out whether I was right or wrong. She paused. I may have been wrong. Do you know that? Not for certain. But, she pressed her lips together. Possibly. He was quiet for a moment. And the child's father? She had known this question would come eventually. She had her answer ready, the same partial truth she had given Marta. But sitting here in the near dark with Davin's steady, unhurried attention on her, the rehearsed answer felt hollow. He's powerful, she said instead. He was. She stopped. He's someone I loved who I don't know how to reconcile with the life I have now. Davin nodded slowly. He didn't push. She exhaled. You're annoyingly easy to talk to. He smiled, looking back at the training ground. I get that a lot. She went to bed that night, turning the conversation over in her mind, looking for the moment it had gone wrong, the place where she had said too much. She couldn't find it. And that, she realized, was the most dangerous thing of all. Her daughter was born on a cold morning in late autumn. The labor was hard and long, and Marta sat with her through the whole of it, steady and capable and calm in the way of people who have caught 100 lives in their hands. Alara held onto the edge of the birthing bed and worked through the pain with a grim determination that Marta later described to others as the most quietly fierce thing she had ever witnessed. And then, finally, it was over. The baby was small and dark-haired and absolutely perfect, and she cried almost immediately. A strong, clear sound that filled the room and made Alara's chest break open in a way she hadn't been prepared for. She held her daughter against her chest and felt something massive and wordless move through her. Hello, she whispered. It's okay. I've got you. I've got you. The baby's crying slowed. Her tiny hand, finding no purchase in the air, wrapped around Alara's finger with a grip that was absurdly strong. Alara stared at that grip, at this person, this impossible, specific person who had not existed 8 months ago. You're going to be all right, she said quietly, to herself as much as to her daughter. We're both going to be all right. She named her veil. If you've made it this far in the story, you already know this isn't going to be easy. Don't forget to subscribe, because the stories I'm going to keep telling are exactly this kind. Stories that stay with you, that wake you up at 3 in the morning. Subscribe now so you never miss one. Months passed. Veil grew with the particular speed of wolf children, which was faster than human children and came with certain unexpected developments. At 3 months, she lifted her head on her own and tracked moving objects with sharp, deliberate focus. At 5 months, she pulled herself to standing by gripping Alara's fingers. Legs steady, balance intuitive. Marta watched this with interest. Strong child, she said. Yes, Alara agreed. Unusually so. Alara said nothing. And Davin? Davin watched Veil with a particular kind of quiet attention. He never overstepped, never reached for her without Alara's clear indication that it was welcome, never used the baby as a tool for closeness. But he was present. He brought small things from the market without fanfare. He sat with Alara in the evenings and kept company while Veil slept in Alara's arms. He was, in short, making himself indispensable without any drama whatsoever. Alara found herself, at some point she couldn't precisely identify, no longer watching for the catch. That was when she knew she was in trouble. I should tell you something, she said to him one evening, 6 weeks after Veil was born. They were in the common room, low fire, Veil asleep in the basket beside them. His elbows were on his knees, attentive. Okay. I'm not just passing through. She looked at him carefully. I ran from somewhere. I ran from a pack. Not because anything happened to me, because I was afraid of what might happen if I stayed. She paused. And I've been here nearly a year, and I feel more settled than I've felt in a long time. But I need you to know that whatever I am here, whatever this is becoming, it's built on something I haven't fully resolved. He held her gaze. Are you asking if that changes anything? Yes. He thought for a moment. Does it change what you want? She opened her mouth, closed it. She knew the honest answer. The honest answer was that she wanted, for the first time since she had left Ironvale, to stop running. to stop watching over her shoulder, to build something with her daughter in this quiet pack with this uncomplicated, steady man who asked good questions and helped with heavy crates and didn't expect her to be invisible. "No," she said. "It doesn't change what I want." He nodded slowly. "Then it doesn't change anything." He reached over and very carefully took her hand. She looked down at their joined hands. The memory of another man, another fire. Another hand came to her so sharply she had to close her eyes against it. But when she opened them, it was Davin's hand holding hers. And it was warm, and she was still here. She let herself hold on. Spring came. Vale was 7 months old. She was sitting up on her own. She watched everything with her father's eyes. Dark, sharp, missing nothing. And Alara tried not to think about that every time she looked at her daughter's face. Davin had begun gently to talk about the future. Not in grand terms. Not in the way that Kale had moved around the subject like something he was building toward and never quite arrived at. Davin was direct. One afternoon in the garden, Vale on a blanket between them, he said simply, "I'd like to claim you, properly, as my Luna." Alara went very still. He continued, unhurried. "I know what that means for you. I know you have a complicated history and an unclear relationship with what came before. I'm not asking you to resolve all of that before you answer. I'm just telling you that this is where I am, and what I'd like, and the decision is entirely yours." She looked at Vale, who was attempting to eat a blade of grass with great determination. She looked at Davin. She thought about what it would mean. A home, a claim, a father for Vale. Not a replacement, not a pretense, but a present, reliable, genuine presence. A life that had edges and warmth and didn't require her to be invisible. She thought about what it would mean to say yes to the future and stop living inside the past. "Give me a week," she said. He nodded. "Take 2. She took 10 days. On the 10th day, she went to find him and said yes. He smiled. Not triumphantly, not with relief, just warmly. And pulled her into an embrace that was careful of Vale, who was on her hip and completely genuine. She rested her head against his chest. She thought, this is good. This is safe. This is real. She believed it. She believed it right up until the morning for days later when everything broke. She had gone to speak to Marta about the ceremony, about what she would need to prepare, about timing and traditions. And Marta, who had been a part of this pack for 30 years and knew its rhythms the way she knew her own heartbeat, had said something offhand while sorting medicines. "It's good for the pack too. Davin's been patient about this. Long game, that one." Alara had smiled and said something vague, but the phrase snagged. "Long game. What do you mean?" she asked carefully. Marta didn't look up. "Well, you know, the alliance questions. The territory thing with Ironvale. Having you here changes the balance of power. Davin's clever about these things." The room went quiet. Alara heard her own pulse. "Marta." Her voice came out steady somehow. "What do you know about me and Ironvale?" Marta finally looked up, and in the half-second before she arranged her expression into something neutral, Alara saw it. The flicker of "oh." She went to Davin's office. She did not knock. He was at his desk. He looked up when she entered and something in her face made him set down his pen without speaking. "You knew," she said. "From the beginning." He held her gaze. "Alara, you knew who I was. You knew where I came from. You knew whose child I was carrying." A pause. "Yes." The word landed like a stone in still water. She had known it was coming. She had known it since Marta's kitchen. But knowing something and hearing it confirmed are still two different things, and the difference still had the power to take her breath. "How long have you known?" "I recognized you when you arrived. I'd received a description." "From whom?" He hesitated. She took a step toward his desk. "From whom, Davin?" "Certain parties who had an interest in your location. There is a conflict developing between Ashvin and Ironvale over border territories. Your presence here, as a woman carrying Ironvale's alpha's child, as his leverage," she said. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. "I was leverage," she said. The word felt like something physical, like something she was holding in her hand that she couldn't put down. The conversations, the patience, the kindness. Her voice cracked on that last word and she hated it, hated the crack, hated the evidence that this had gotten inside her. All of it. Alara. He stood. It started that way. But, don't. She took a step back. Whatever you're about to say, don't. He stopped. She stood there with Veil on her hip, this small person who was watching both of them with those dark, sharp eyes, and she thought, love has now betrayed me twice, in two completely different ways, and I am running out of places to land. She thought, the only man who was never trying to manage me was the one I ran from. She thought, I wish I had asked him. She turned and walked out. 3 days later, the war started. Not metaphorically. Actually started. A line of Ironvale wolves appearing at the Ashvin border in formation, which is the kind of announcement that does not require words. Ashvin responded in kind. The perimeter went into lockdown. Every capable fighter was armed and positioned. Davin's face, when she saw him briefly in the chaos of mobilization, was the face of an alpha at war. Closed, calculating, stripped of the warmth she had mistaken for something genuine. She took Veil to Marta's cottage, which was in the interior of the Pack territory, as far from the border as possible. Marta bolted the door. Stay here, Marta said. Both of you. Whatever happens, stay here. Who's out there? Alara asked. Iron Veil? Who's leading them? Marta looked at her. Something complicated moved through her expression. The Alpha himself. He came personally. Alara stood very still. They say he's been looking for something, Marta continued, quieter now. For a very long time. Someone. The word went through her like cold water. She looked at Veil, who was asleep in the cot by the window. One small fist curled beside her face, completely peaceful in the way of the very young who do not yet know that the world can catch fire. She thought about the last time she had seen Kale's face. She thought about I'm working on it. She thought about the rumor she had never confirmed. The question she had been too afraid to ask. The night she had packed one bag in under 20 minutes and walked away from everything without looking back. She thought about what Marta had said. Long search. Personal appearance. One person. Her heart was doing something complicated and loud. She was not supposed to leave the cottage. She thought about Veil and staying. She thought about 8 months of searching and a personal appearance at a border and how you do not bring yourself to a war for leverage. She opened the door. The battle was at the eastern edge of the Pack territory, which was far enough from the cottage that she heard it before she saw it. The clash of metal, the sounds of wolves in their shifted forms, the deep specific chaos of two trained forces colliding. She ran toward it. She should not have run toward it. Every rational part of her brain registered this. She ran anyway. She saw him, even from distance, even in the chaos of a border conflict with wolves moving in every direction. She saw him. He was shifted partially, the particular state that alphas can hold larger, stronger, not fully wolf but not fully human, and he moved through the fighting with a controlled ferocity that was awful and precise. But it was the direction he was moving that stopped her. He was not moving toward Davin. He was moving toward her. Not strategically. Not tactically. He was moving toward her the way a person moves toward someone they have been looking for a very long time, with a single-minded, everything-else-be-damned focus that had nothing to do with war and everything to do with the 8 months she had been gone. She stood at the edge of the tree line and her hand was over her mouth and her eyes were burning. He hadn't seen her yet. And then he had. He stopped mid-stride. Everything around them kept moving, the fighting, the shouting, the chaos of two packs at each other's throats, and they stood 10 meters apart and looked at each other, and it was the quietest moment she had ever been in. She did not see the archer. That was the thing about battles, you see what you're looking at, and you are blind to everything else. She had been looking at Kale. The arrow was meant for him. Fired from somewhere in the tree line above and to the left, aimed at the Alpha of Ironvale who was standing exposed and still in the middle of a war zone because he had just found the one person who could make him forget, for a single unguarded moment, every instinct for self-preservation he possessed. She saw it before he did. She was already moving before the thought formed. She stepped. The arrow took her in the side. Not the chest, not immediately fatal, but wrong. Wrong location, wrong angle, wrong everything. She had enough training, enough basic wolf anatomy to know in the first second what she was working with, and what she was working with was not good. She heard her own sound. Not quite a gasp, not quite a cry, something between. And then Kale was there. He caught her before she hit the ground. Both arms, her entire weight, dropped to his knees with her in a single motion that was so fast she barely registered falling. His hands were on her face first. checking her eyes, checking her focus, the way you check someone you know and are terrified for, and then on the wound, pressing, his expression doing something she had never seen it do before. Breaking. No, he said. Not loudly. Just no. Like a refusal. Like a command he was issuing to something he could not actually command. Kale. Her voice was thin. Stop talking. His hands were pressing on the wound. Around them, the battle was slowing. Both sides responding to the sight of their alpha on his knees with a woman bleeding in his arms. Stop. I've got you. You're going to. I know, she said. He looked at her face. Something in her expression was telling him something, and he was refusing to receive the information, and that refusal was the most painfully human thing she had ever seen him do. The rumor, she said. It wasn't true.
No.
His jaw was set so tight she could see the muscle working in it. It was never true. Alara, I need you to. I should have asked you. The words were coming slowly. Breathing was getting harder. I was afraid of the answer. I was afraid you would. She stopped. I should have stayed. You should have stayed. His voice broke on it just slightly, just enough. But you're here now. You're here right now and we can. The healer is coming. There's a healer. Kale. She put her hand on his face. He stopped. She felt his jaw under her palm. The sharp line of it. Something she had touched 100 times in closed rooms in the dark. She's yours, she said quietly. Her name is Vale. She's in the healer's cottage, the one near the interior. She almost smiled. She has your eyes. And your grip. The healer thinks she's unusually strong. His hand covered hers on his face.
Obidza.
Holding. Alara. I wanted you to know. Her thumb moved over his cheekbone. I wanted you to know before. Don't. Before I couldn't say it anymore. The fighting had stopped. Everyone had stopped. Even the wind seemed to have lowered itself. She looked up at his face. This face she had memorized in the dark. This face that had never been soft where others could see and had never been anything but soft where only she could, and she thought, I loved you completely and badly, and from a distance I created because I was afraid, and that was my greatest mistake, and I am sorry, and I am not sorry, because out of all of it came Vale. I wish I had stayed, she said. She said it clearly. She wanted it to be the last clear thing. She wanted him to have it. She felt his hand tighten on hers. She felt him say her name, just once, close to her ear, low and private in the way he had always spoken to her when they were alone. And then the world went quiet. Vale was brought to him an hour later. He was still in the same place. He had not moved. 3 of his senior wolves had tried, gently, to suggest that the alpha should step away, and 3 of his senior wolves had been silenced with a look that communicated, without ambiguity, that they should not try again. Marta came across the field with the baby against her chest, her face drawn with grief and the particular steadiness of people who have watched too much life end. She stopped a few feet away. Kale looked up. His eyes found Vale immediately, went to her face, dark hair, dark eyes that were looking at him with the sharp, unimpressed focus of someone who is new to the world but already taking comprehensive notes. Marta brought her closer. He reached out. His hands, which had held armies and controlled packed territories and ended challenges without flinching, were not entirely steady as he took his daughter for the first time. Vale looked at him. She put her hand out, that strong, searching hand, and found his finger, and held. The grip was remarkable. Marta had thought so from the beginning. Unreasonably strong for a 7-month-old. Something that suggested the child knew exactly what she was, and what she was made of, and was simply waiting for the rest of the world to catch up. Kale looked at his daughter's face for a long time. When he finally looked up, the war was over. The border conflict, the political calculations, Davin's strategies and Stonecroft's maneuvering, and 8 months of searching across 3 territories. All of it felt small and far away and irrelevant. What remained was this. His daughter's hand around his finger. The life that Alara had kept safe. In her body and then in her arms. Across all the distance that fear and false rumors and a choice unmade had put between them. He lowered his head. I've got you, he said quietly to Vale. The way Alara had said it, in the beginning, in the healer's cottage, when Vale was new and the world was uncertain and Alara had been the only thing standing between her daughter and all of it. I've got you.
Vals grip tighte ned.
The wolves of Iron Vale, watching their alpha kneel in the broken light with his daughter in his arms, said nothing. There was nothing to say. They say the child of Alara and Kale Draven grew to be something extraordinary. That Vale Draven, raised between two packs and carrying the grief and the love of her parents like an inheritance she wore rather than bore, became the kind of wolf that stories are made from. That the grip she had used on her father's finger in those first minutes grew into something larger and stranger. An ability to hold things together, people together, packs together, that went beyond any bloodline explanation, as if two people who had loved each other imperfectly and with such devastating cost had poured something of themselves into her that was more than genes. They say Kale never remarried. Not from bitterness. Not from refusal. But because what he had had, quiet and secret and badly timed and real, was the thing, and he knew it, and he had the kind of character that does not accept substitutes for the thing. They say he told Vale about her mother honestly. Not as a saint, not as a tragedy, but as a person, stubborn, perceptive, afraid of the wrong things and brave about the right ones, capable of great love and capable of great mistakes, which is another way of saying she was completely human. They say Vale listened to these stories with those dark eyes that saw everything. And they say she grew up knowing the shape of a love that doesn't always arrive correctly or in time, but that is no less real for all of that. And maybe that was Alara's gift in the end. Not the life she had lived, but the truth she left behind. That was the story of Alara, the maid who loved an alpha, who ran when she should have stayed, who found kindness and found betrayal and found, at the very end, the answer to the question she had been too afraid to ask. The answer was always yes. The answer was always him. If the story stayed with you, if you felt it, then you're in the right place. Subscribe now because I have more stories like this one waiting for you. Stories of love that costs everything and legacies that outlast grief. Stories that remind us that being human, or in this case being wolf, means getting it wrong sometimes and choosing anyway. Hit subscribe. I'll see you at the next one. For Alara, who wished she had stayed, she did in the end. In the daughter who held on.